and you see that there is a big change in the way that they are able to interact with family members and interact with the sphere outside. And then when you look at Radhabai, you are also your attention is also diverted to the plight of deprived and underprivileged women, who are victims of patriarchy both at home and outside in the public sphere. And you see that Radhabai is a widow. And what happens to a widow who is not educated, who does not have an enlightened getaway or a window to enhance her socio-economic status? The only way that she can earn something is by being a household maid or a cook. And Radhabai is lucky to have gained the status of at least a cook. We know in present day modern India the plight of maids who have been working in houses, little girls who have been working in houses as maids, and what kind of torture and exploitation they are made to go through. So that is another point that is very worrying. And then again, this whole idea of via media technology courtship and the finalizing of the marriage that happens in the play is foregrounded. That how the Indian middle class is caught between tradition and modernity, and how the youngsters, knowingly or unknowingly, at the conscious or subconscious level, are redefining morality, while the older generation, their parents and the elders, they look on, probably not entirely helplessly, but with a sense of dilemma and conflict, or whether they are capable of preventing the youth, their wards, from resorting to technology entirely, and from, along with the positive side of technology, not falling prey to the negative side. Because you see in the case of Vivan, he's much ahead of his age and times, and of how the internet and other sources of information that one has at the click of a finger has enabled him to know about books which are meant to be read at a later age. How he very blatantly tells Hema that he's already read Lady Chatterley's Lover, and of how these books and all that is available on the internet, how these things are capable of kind of inflaming the passions in the teenagers and the youth. And when you come to the scene which I will be discussing in detail, where Vidula goes to the cyber cafe to spend her private time by giving ample expression, a kind of spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, as Wordsworth has defined what makes poetry. How her innermost feelings are passionately brought forth in the way she interacts with Swami Ananganath. And when we come to scene 3, it is the great Indian wedding phenomenon, and what is the great change in the mores of the Indian wedding that have taken place, of how when you have a groom who's going to arrive at the last minute with hardly a few hours to make preparations, of how there is tension on the one hand, but there's also the respite that invitation cards can be printed in a matter of hours and can be dispatched, or at best relatives can be informed over the mobile phone or through SMSs or through emails, of how everything is kind of envisaged or used in or at least imagined to be used in the electronic form. You come to scene 4, which is a kind of an explosion where Girishi deals with the underbelly, the ugly underbelly of the Indian middle class, which is supposed to be the repository, or the Indian middle class who are supposed to be the custodians of Indian morality, of how there are chances that Vidula is not the child, the biological child of her biological father, that she may be, and it's almost a certainty that her biological father is her paternal uncle Ramdas, which is why when he went to get her birth certificate prepared, he wrote his name in the slot which was meant for the father's name. And although it comes as a great shock to us who are we are shaken out of our complacency and our comfort when we realize the very, very outspoken way in which Girishi holds up a mirror to the middle class and shows us a chink in the armor and says it's not always that the middle class is treading the path of morality, that this is also possible. And then again there is a repetition of the increasing Americanization of the Indian youth. In scene 4 you have a discussion of the family upheavals where Girishi kind of rivets the entire discussion around two poles, where there is Ramdas on the one hand, or what rivalry Ramdas supposedly had with his brother, or what, according to Mrs. Nadkarni, is the harm or injury that he's done to the family, or how Mr. Nadkarni feels that his brother was more capable of him, but was because luck was not on his side, or that the opportunity was denied to him, he really couldn't make it big or become as successful as himself. And there are all these things. And then there is Radhabai's sad story where her daughter appears intermittently through the play as a character in absentia, and the whole story of Radhabai and her insane daughter and the plight in which both mother and daughter are, of how this is presented by Rohit in that televised serial, and how he tries to encash not only on the saga of his own family but also on a tragic event like this, which also is Girishi's way of criticizing perhaps the increasing sensationalization that the public media, be it print or be it the audiovisual media, is prone to, and how, say for example, one television channel would vie with another television channel in sensationalizing the same incident to a greater extent, or by presenting something that is more sensational than what the others have done in order to gain their higher TRP ratings. This also brings us to question the morality or the ethical part of what journalism or of what media reporting should be, which is also a kind of worrying part as far as we think of India in the 21st century. When we come to scene 5, we see that there is this whole sad episode of which I mentioned before, of Rohit's wife having gone to a natal home for the delivery, and his thinking, all along we have Girishi telling us that this is the saga of the Indian middle class in general, but also the saga of the South Indian Saraswat Brahmin middle class household. And Saraswat Brahmins are supposed to be extremely conscious and extremely rigorous when it comes to defending the moral traditions that they're supposed to stand for. And you have Rohit here who throws all caution to the winds and probably takes Isabel as a very, very easy prey or as a pastime, simply because she is a Christian girl. And this also brings us to question the whole notion that we have our own prejudices, and we tend to define communities or generalizing traits of communities by stray incidents, which is not always the case, because in the same play, when Hema expresses a remorse that Rohit could have found a better girl within the community, the mother, about which I'm very happy, comes to the rescue of this whole debate, and she says, well, what difference is there now between the Hindu girls or the Saraswat Brahmin girls and the Christian girls? That when you see the way they dress and talk and conduct themselves, there is hardly any difference, and there is such a homogenization and there is such an Americanization that is difficult to tell which young boy or girl belongs to which community. So these are also questions that Girishji seems to be very seriously raising. In scene 6, is as the OUP review and one of the reviews of the wedding album in the Hindu happened to define as, the opening of Pandora's box. You may well juxtapose this scene with scene 8 and, try to see scene 6 as the insider's perspective of the modern day cyberized, should I say, India, where this girl, she rushes at the slightest leisure that she has to the safe, passionate, lustful cocoon that she can, where she can give vent to her innermost passionate, lustful feelings. Where at one point she says, when her sister says, oh come on, sit here and talk to us, and she insists on going to the cyber cafe, she says, let me go there while I can before I get married. So the question that is raised is, marriage has been looked upon as a kind of fortress which offers a lot of repose, which is supposed to be a haven. And what is it that the young people feel when they try to have kind of parallel vents or parallel windows? What is the kind of solace that they think they will have in marriage or not have in marriage, which prompts them to look for alternatives like Vidula does? And the question that we have in our mind is, will the interaction that she has with that nameless Swami, with whom she can converse and, as I said, give vent to all her intense passions, will that practice stop once she gets married to Ashwin, or will it continue? Or will it be that vent that she has, or will it be something other? Will it be another alternative? What is the concept of fidelity then? And how do we think is fidelity being redefined? What is the amount of freedom that one can take while one is in marriage? These are also questions that are being raised in the course of the play. And then you have that incident where there is a group of angry protesters, the moral police brigade, of which modern India is increasingly getting acquainted with, and we are all aware of some of the incidents that have taken place through the length and breadth of the country, where especially girls are targeted when they go to pubs, or when they go to when they try to express themselves as liberated Indian individuals, where the moral police over here is shown to be doing what they do only for gaining some quick money. And when the cyber cafe owner consoles Vidula and says, "Don't you worry, madam, they'll be gone in a matter of minutes." Do you think they are really worried about what is, what is corrupting the social fabric or the moral fabric of our country and our society? They are only here for a few bucks. Once I see them off, I will put you on to the connection again. And this is something that is also very, very worrying, and it hits out at you very poignantly. In scene 7, you come to the hollowness and the monotony and the hypocrisy and boredom of marriage, especially in the Indian context, and the empty nest syndrome which parents in India are increasingly facing, because their sons are abroad, their daughters are getting married abroad, and they are left to fend for themselves, not being able to leave their homeland in spite of invitations from their children, and not being able to adapt and be comfortable in the foreign setup. This is also another very interesting aspect that Girishji brings up. In scene 8, which I'd like all of you to read very carefully and in detail, because that is the cornerstone of the play, is how life in America and India are juxtaposed. Of how Ashwin says that, he is trying to show the hollowness and the futility of everything in American life, which the Indian youth is hankering to procure. He says, "I've been there, done it all, and it's given me nothing." So he's trying to send out a message to young people like you that what you are looking for in America is nothing but a kind of hollowness. It's a bubble that will burst, and it has no hope to offer, because Ashwin, epitomizing American youth, is looking to India as a land of spirituality and as a land of great repose. And what he looks for in Vidula as an Indian wife, he says, "I'm looking towards India and an Indian wife as an anchor, as somebody who will allow me to settle in my life, because I have not been able to find the repose that I am looking for." And in scene 9, we come across this many instances which talk about the drastic difference in the perspective on marriage, and how the elder siblings are advising Vidula that she need not worry. If anything goes wrong, she should not hesitate to divorce Ashwin. That is what is being redefined for us at the end of the play. So I leave you with a lot many questions which I hope you will discuss and think about. What is the wedding? What does the wedding mean? What does marriage mean as an institution to us as Indians, and especially to you as the Indian youth? I hope you've enjoyed my talk. I'd like to talk to you again. I thank you for being here. Hope to see you sometime. Goodbye.